I think KPIs get a bad rap. They've become synonymous with micromanagement, and in an era when employee engagement, individual career mobility, and happiness at work have risen up in the collective consciousness, well, KPIs have taken a real hammering, which leaves CEOs with a significant issue. Because if you don't measure what's happening in your business, then how can you possibly know what's working and what's not? And without that insight, how can you work out what to do? Personally, I've always worked in KPI-driven environments. I spent the first 10 years of my career at a major global recruitment firm where everything was measured, from the number of calls made and time spent on the phone to the big ticket stuff like sales and revenue. And I loved it, if I'm honest, but much of the time the KPIs we had were used poorly. It was very much a case of do more, and the numbers were used as an indicator mostly of effort rather than of effectiveness. And it's this fundamental misunderstanding of the function of KPIs that's led to their poor reputation. When the numbers become the point's being missed. KPIs are key performance indicators. They're not targets. They indicate what's happening in your business. And that gives you two kinds of insight. Firstly, they tell you where to focus your attention. And secondly, they give you clear early warning of issues that are developing. Very few KPIs should be looked at in isolation or as raw numbers. If instead you use KPIs to map the steps in your process or system and consider ratios rather than absolute figures, then they're an incredibly powerful tool. For example, on the search side of our business at Singular, we have only two KPIs that exist as absolute numbers. One of those is the number of candidates contacted, and the other is the number of placements made. In other words, the initial input and the ultimate output. Every other step of the process is measured as a conversion rate. By looking at it this way, we can see where to take action and also where someone is outperforming our expectations or outperforming their peers. And when we identify that a KPI is lower than we'd expect, then we develop a theory as to why that is and an action plan to fix it. So if, for example, 55% of the screening calls we conduct with candidates result in us sending a CV to a job, but we'd expect that ratio to be 70%, we can analyze why that's happening and make a plan to rectify it. If the ratio improves, then we were probably correct. If not, we need another hypothesis or another plan. But if, on the other hand, we see that one member of the team is converting at 90%, then we can speak to them to understand what it is that they're doing differently to others to produce that result, then replicate it and make it best practice. In this way, KPIs help us to understand why performance is good or bad, so we can maintain or improve our levels. Without them, we'd be shooting in the dark, making changes based on what we thought was happening rather than what the reality was. We'd only have one indicator of whether the changes we made worked, and that's whatever the ultimate output is. And so we could spend a huge amount of time and energy on things that just don't make a difference, while at the same time missing the fundamental issues. And the research supports the use of KPIs in high-performing businesses. A Harvard Business Review study found that companies who align KPIs with their strategic goals are 70% more likely to achieve them. And Gartner have reported that organizations that use performance management tools that are typically based on a foundation of KPIs experience a 20% increase in productivity on average. The other benefit of defined agreed KPIs is that they provide your team with clarity, and I found that the best format for them is a scorecard. Once you've done the work to identify your key KPIs, provide each department and each individual with a quarterly scorecard. Have them track their performance against the targets you've set out on this scorecard, and review it with them weekly. Investigate alongside them the areas in which you're not seeing what you'd expect, and create an action plan to affect them. When things are going well, develop plans to improve the conversion ratios even further, and this has a compounding effect on the overall performance of your business. Now, I must admit, when I introduced scorecards at Singular back in 2022, I wasn't sure how well they'd be received. We'd always discussed KPIs, but never to this level of granularity, so I expected a little pushback. But to my surprise, the team loved them because it gave them visibility on what they needed to achieve on a quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily basis, broken down into specific numbers they could deliver, so they knew what a good day looked like. Our performance has steadily improved since we've had them, and they're now an absolute cornerstone of how we operate. So don't be afraid of KPIs and scorecards. They're huge assets if you use them properly. Some key steps to take are: number one, make sure you choose the right KPIs. Just because you can measure something doesn't mean you should. Identify the activities and results that really make a difference to your business, and try to limit yourself to those ones only. Number two, set up scorecards for your team so that they can track their own performance and so that you can review them together. And three, make sure to actually review them regularly, at least weekly, to ensure you identify issues early. Then four, create action plans based on the KPIs, particularly the conversion rates. Focus on these ratios rather than the raw numbers, except for initial inputs and ultimate outputs, and try to identify why they are what they are, rather than pointing fingers. If you haven't done this so far, you'll have to spend a bit of time creating a baseline, so do that for one quarter. But KPIs and scorecards will help you create systems in your business that consistently produce results, which means you can rely on a solid level of performance while plotting the future of your organization.